Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to all of you. It is good to have you here with us. We are really happy to be here with you and with Reverend Anne Burghardt, who is the LWF General Secretary-elect. We have participants from all over the world, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. The purpose of this briefing is to give you a chance to meet the General Secretary-elect, Reverend Burkhardt, who was elected by the LWF's Council on Saturday and takes office on the 1st of November. I want to offer just a few practical words in the beginning. Stefan, can I ask you to change the slide? Thank you. This is an online press briefing, and it is being recorded so that we can also share it with those who can't be with us today. If you want to ask a question, you can use the Zoom function to raise your hand, or you can indicate in the chat that you can have a question. You can even write in the Q&A function on Zoom that your question. And we will call on you. And when we call on you, we will also invite you to unmute yourself to ask the question. You don't have to turn on your video. It's enough to unmute and then speak. We would like you to introduce yourself and name which media you are representing today. We have about 45 minutes, so please be concise and as brief as possible so that we can accommodate more questions. We may not get to all of your questions today, but we do have some interview slots available in the coming days, and I will say a bit more about that later. There is interpretation, simultaneous interpretation available. You will see in the Zoom toolbar a globe. Please select the language you prefer. Also English, because if there are questions and answers in languages other than English, then you will need to have English selected to make sure that works. Now, I really want to welcome our General Secretary-elect, Reverend Anne Burghardt, and congratulations, Anne.
Thank you so much, Shani, and I'm really happy to be here today with you. Be it then via screen, but at least we can have some contact to each other.
Exactly, yes. I think the first question we are all wondering is, who is Anne Burghardt? So can you introduce yourself in just a few words?
Well, thank you for this question, Ani. As already mentioned, my name is Anne Burghardt. I am an ordained pastor of the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church, and I serve currently in twofold capacity in my home church as head of development at the Institute of Theology of the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church, and also as advisor for international and ecumenical relations at the head office of my home church. During the past few years, I have also been teaching ecumenism, a task that is very closely connected to my previous work at the Communion Office of the LWF in years 2013 to 18, when I served in Geneva as Secretary for Ecumenical Relations. I was also responsible for coordinating the 500th anniversary of the Reformation and the content of the 2017 Assembly. And this, of course, gave me a good opportunity to learn to know different regions of the LWF as well. Now, if I should also say a few words about my own theological formation, then this has been shaped by several factors. Besides the rather classical European continental evangelical Lutheran theology, I have been shaped by Estonian theological thinkers from the past century, who unfortunately are not that widely known internationally, as they weren't able to publish their writings during the Soviet times. But something that I have really learned from them is commitment to theology and the willingness to stay true to your faith even under difficult conditions. And I have also been shaped by Orthodox theology, because Estonia is a unique context where Lutheran and Orthodox churches meet. And even my dissertation, which I just recently finalized, actually deals with questions of Orthodox liturgy. Now, further, I would also, of course, like to mention the impacts of ecumenical dialogues on my own formation, and last but not least, the various LWF study processes that for me personally have been an important eye-opener in view of public theology. Now, Estonia, the country where I come from, is considered to be one of the most secularized countries in the world. And actually, my own family background was also secular. And I was baptized and came to faith only as a teenager. And I guess this is partly why I think that it is really an extremely important task for the church to take seriously the task to be a translator and interpreter of the words and deeds of Jesus Christ into a theology that encompasses all aspects of God's holistic mission and does it in a meaningful and comprehensible ways. And finally, last but not least, I am married to Matthias Burghardt, who also serves as a pastor at the Estonian Evangelical Lutheran Church, and who has always offered me support and encouraged me. And we have two wonderful children. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for this introduction, which gives you, we're getting to know you, and this gives us a good foundation. I want to mention to all of you who are here, feel free to sort of offer greetings in the chat, tell us who you are and where you are hailing from. I have one more question for you, Anne, before we open the floor. And that is, as the General Secretary-elect, what is your vision for the global communion of Lutheran churches? What is your vision for the LWF?
I actually believe that the current vision statement of the LWF expresses well what the LWF is and should be about. Liberated by God's grace, a communion in Christ, living and working together for a just, peaceful, and reconciled world. And this vision statement also reflects the four pillars that the LWF was built upon in 1947: rescue for the needy, common initiatives in mission, joint efforts in theology, and common response to the ecumenical challenge. And I believe that all these aspects should remain the core of LWF's life and work. Now, the question how these four pillars are then best translated and implemented today by the LWF as communion of churches must constantly be reflected in joint discernment with member churches and related agencies. And as the LWF is a communion of churches, it also means that the LWF Communion Office needs to be, in a sense, a super connector, connecting member churches to each other, helping them to share their gifts with each other, but also to support them to give a vibrant witness in their local contexts. Well, the awareness about belonging to the LWF communion needs to get to the ground in member churches. And I think this is and remains a huge task and partly also a challenge also for the Communion Office, how to reach this aim best. Then further, the LWF needs to continue with theological work and share the message of God's grace that has become visible in Jesus Christ and liberates and empowers us to serve the neighbor and to care for the creation. And I think that LWF's excellent humanitarian and development work, as well as its work in the field of advocacy and justice, are basically expressions of this service and are really founded in the faith. And through this, the LWF contributes to bringing peace and reconciliation into the world in its brokenness. And through empowering its member churches, the LWF supports them in becoming actors that help to invoke positive change in their societies.
Thank you very much. Now I want to open up for questions. As I said before, you can raise your hand in Zoom, you can send us a chat message, or you can ask in the Q&A, and we have 3 questions so far. So can I begin with Julia Heidi de Lopez? If you unmute and ask the first question. You can talk now, Julia. Thank you.
Right. Hello, my name is Julia Heide de Lopez. I'm a radio editor for the Evangelische Kirche im NDR, a church-based media office in northern Germany. Congratulations, Anne Burkhardt, first of all, on your elections. And I think many women will feel hopeful and inspired by your election. And I would like to know, what does it mean to you to be the first woman General Secretary of LWF? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this question. Of course, I am extremely honored to have been elected as the General Secretary. And although I hope that this is first and foremost affirmation of my experience and also my professional background, I do believe that it is very significant that I am the first woman in this particular position. And I hope that my election will be an inspiration to women across the communion, both young and old, because I think that seeing a woman in a leadership role will inspire them. And this, of course, also puts a very special responsibility on my shoulders to give my best for leading this communion.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up question, Julia?
Yes. Am I still on? Do you still hear me?
You are still on, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my second question for you is, as incoming leader of the Global Lutheran Communion, what issues or topics do you foresee as your own priorities? Thank you.
Thank you. I think for me, it is extremely important that the Church, so to say, holds to the three main dimensions that already the old Church saw as the main tasks for Christians, namely proclamation of the gospel, service to the neighbor, liturgy, and prayer. And I think all these three aspects, kerygma, liturgia, diaconia, they need to be well represented and well balanced. And I believe that, as I already briefly mentioned in my vision description before for the LWF, I think that theological work needs to be the basis for everything that the LWF does. But if we really want to be true to our theological commitment, we need also to remain true to the service to the neighbor and to the world. So my personal priorities would be to see how to connect better with the member churches on the ground, how to increase the awareness of belonging to this communion. And this might also mean creating more accessible materials for member churches. This also means strengthening theological education. And this also means strengthening the relationships between LWF communions, humanitarian development and diaconical work, and the local member churches on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Fernando Manic. Can you please unmute and ask your question? Fernando, you need to unmute. That does not seem to be working. Maybe we move to the next question and then see if we can get Fernando again. Can I ask Jan Herbermann to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, good morning. My name is Jan Herbermann, and I'm the Geneva correspondent for EPD, the German Protestant news agency based in Frankfurt. Basically, I have two questions. The first is on the relationship of the LWF to the Catholic Church, and how do you want to strengthen the relationship to the Catholic Church? And secondly, could you please tell us the result of the vote from Saturday. I haven't seen that in the press releases. Many thanks.
Thanks a lot. Well, first question about the relations to the Roman Catholic Church. I think that the relations between the LWF and the Roman Catholic Church actually belong to the success stories of ecumenism in a certain sense. I think it was very significant that in 2017, when we commemorated the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, we also celebrated the 50th anniversary of ecumenical dialogue between the LWF and the Roman Catholic Church. And this has been an ongoing dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church that started already directly after Vatican II. And I think that the current topics that are on, so to say, on the agenda are various. What I would like to mention at this stage is the ongoing process about what actually the JDDJ, the Joint Declaration of Doctrine of Justification, means for all participants, including the Roman Catholic Church. What does it mean for their theology today? And this is a process that is ongoing, and where there are also more partners next to Lutherans and Roman Catholics. And the similar way as the 500th anniversary of the Reformation was commemorated in ecumenical spirit, we also intend to commemorate the 500th anniversary of the Confessio Augustana in 2030 in ecumenical spirit and together with our Catholic partners. So I do believe that that the connections to Roman Catholic Church will continue on very supportive and friendly, mutually friendly grounds. And to your second question, I believe I can say it here that the votes were 22-28. Thank you.
That is also, I'll share the link to the story that's published on the LWF website where you can find those numbers, Jan. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Can I invite Matilda Ljungqvist to ask the next question, if she could be unmuted?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Matilda Ljungqvist. I'm a reporter at the Swedish Church magazine. And I wonder if you can name some examples of what you see as the major challenges for the member churches at this time.
Thank you. Well, as the LWF is composed of very different member churches who live in very different contexts, then of course the challenges also slightly vary. But it is of course quite obvious that at the moment, one of the big challenges for many churches has been the COVID pandemic and everything that has come along with it. And it has really affected many livelihoods and many lives. So this is also a kind of a solidarity test, I think, for all the churches, how to support each other in this very difficult time. Then secondly, related to this partly, of course, are the financial challenges that several member churches are encountering these days. And last but not least, I think an increasing polarization should be mentioned as one of the main challenges in many churches, which have to encounter partly very fundamentalist tendencies. And this is, of course, something that is not unique to ecclesial context, but that can also be encountered in political scene. Excuse me. So I would name these three challenges at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have here, let me see, Kirsi Elo. Can you unmute and ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, I'm Kirsi Elo from Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Mission. Congratulations on behalf of FELM. My question to you is, just a minute. In the strategy of the Lutheran World Federation, mission consists of these three: proclamation, diaconia, and advocacy. What do you think of holistic mission, and what is your vision of mission?
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned before briefly, I think the main task of the church is to translate the words and deeds of Jesus Christ into holistic mission, which really, and into theology that encompasses holistic mission. So this means that being liberated by God's grace, we are liberated not for ourselves, but to serve the others. And this, of course, needs to find expression in advocacy, in humanitarian aid, in development aid, in diaconia, but also in pastoral care, also in supporting Christians and other humans belonging to whatever religious background or having whatever religious background during the times of psychological crisis. So I think that the task of the church is really to serve the whole human being, not just his or her spiritual needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from Sinar Warugu. Can I ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. I am Sinar Warugu from ONKP Church, Indonesia. I'll just short question. What will you do? I mean, LWF with you as a general secretary, new general secretary. What will you do regarding to the COVID-19? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think the LWF has already started a very good support scheme in view of creating the rapid response project fund, which supports several member churches in their very urgent needs. But as I already said before, I think that the COVID crisis, in a sense, is really a test for the solidarity of churches. So we need to see which churches have suffered most, which churches need more help, which churches must be supported more intensely, and then we need to see within the communion how to support them according to their needs, because I think it is very difficult to say or to give a sort of a one-fits-all solution in this situation. So I think here one really needs to see what the local realities are, and as I said, it will be and it is a solidarity test for the churches. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Darius Brunks. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah.
Darius, you are muted now. So can you? Yes. Can you?
From the Lutheran Church in Poland. I have a question and two questions actually. You are a professional female theologian specializing in the Orthodox theology, and congratulations on your doctoral thesis. And do you think that your election may influence Lutheran Orthodox dialogue, or are we so different and so far away from each other that it doesn't really matter who the General Secretary is?
Thank you for this question. Well, I had the honor to be a member of the International Lutheran Orthodox Dialogue in previous years. So I have several very good relations to our Orthodox brothers. I can't say at this point if my election will specifically now have an influence on Lutheran Orthodox relations, but I think the Orthodox Church will certainly be happy to see someone working in this leadership position who is also familiar with their theology, history, and background. And just as a perhaps funny side remark, when I was elected on Saturday, I am sitting currently at the head office of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Estonia, and just right behind this building, there is the main Orthodox cathedral. And at the very moment when the votes were made public, the bells of the Orthodox cathedral started to ring more intensely than usual. So just to give you this short story to the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the second question?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, you mentioned the polarization as one of the big challenges in the Lutheran community. What is your idea for the inner Lutheran dialogue with, for example, with your neighbor country Latvia or with the International Lutheran Council? Because we have so many tensions also in our Lutheran fellowship, and we know the conflicts in the Anglican Communion. What is your idea, and do you think there is a turbulent future for the Lutheran World Federation, just as for the Anglican Communion?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, first of all, to start a bit more broadly, I think the tensions partly also stem from the facts that there is in communion, such as the LWF or Anglican Communion or the World's Communion of Reformed Churches, there is always a certain tension between the autonomy of the churches and the mutual accountability. But it is, of course, clear that, so to say, the distinction lines today don't necessarily always run between the churches, but they do run within the churches as well. And what I see as very much needed here is the willingness for dialogue, first of all, the willingness and readiness to listen to the arguments of the other side. And I always like to refer to the scripture passage in Galatians 2:7-10, where we see the description of how Apostle Paul was given the right hand of fellowship by the pillars of the Jerusalem congregation, who were having a completely different opinion about circumcision than Apostle Paul, for instance. But they gave him the right hand of fellowship because they were able to recognize God's grace in him. And I think this is really an aim towards which we should try to strive, to recognize the grace given to our sisters and brothers in Christ. And one more thing to add, perhaps, I think there is a lot actually that the LWF can learn also from ecumenical dialogues in terms of methodology, how to bring two partly conflicting views together. Like, for instance, the methodology that has been used by JDDJ, differentiated consensus, etc., as well as all sorts of broader, let's say, conversation methodologies that often actually stem from Africa. And for instance, Anglican Communion has been using the method of Indaba conversation for having the somewhat more complicated conversations about controversial issues. So I think these are all the venues that we could and should explore. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have Wim Hootman. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Next on my list.
Yes, thank you. It's Houtman, but that doesn't matter. I work for Nederlands Dagblad, a Christian daily newspaper in the Netherlands. I was intrigued, Ms. Burghardt, when you told us that you come from a secular background and came to faith as a teenager. What drew you to the Christian faith in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, in fact, in my case, it was a friend of mine who took me to the confirmation class. So, funnily enough, I haven't come to the church through a youth group, for instance, as it often happens, but really through kind of very classical path, through confirmation classes, through worship services, etc. And I think what really sparked my interest were the existential questions that one often has in one's teenage age, and I think this is something that one may not lose out of sight, the existential questions that human beings still have today, and I think this is particularly important for secular contexts. If we really want to reach out to people and really manage to touch their hearts with a message about God's grace, I think we need to see where their deep existential needs are, and I think particularly with a message that the LWF very strongly presented also in the context of the Reformation anniversary. I think it is important in today's world, particularly in some parts of the world, to try to offer an alternative to this kind of success ideology. There needs to be, so to say, a counter narrative, which really tells us about God's unconditional love towards human beings. And this is also extremely important in the context of prosperity gospel, for instance, which is gaining a lot of ground in several parts of the world. So I think this is really something that is so much in the core of our Lutheran theology, and we need to promote it and just bring the news out to the people, so to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a second question?
Yes, if I may. You mentioned polarization within certain Lutheran churches or within the World Federation. Where does that, in what areas does that play out mainly?
Thank you. Well, there are of course different topics around which this polarization becomes evident, and of course the most common ones, so to say, are women's ordination, often or sometimes, and secondly, of course, the issues around marriage and sexuality. But I think the reasons for this polarization lie a bit deeper, and sometimes it is also the question in how far the religion has been instrumentalized for reaching certain ideological aims, or it has been made a tool for a certain worldview. So this is one side of this issue, but another side is, of course, precisely the question of theological education, in my opinion, because I think that with a solid theological education, one is able to avoid very black and white views or opinions about certain issues. And particularly in our Lutheran context, we are so strong in our theology, in dialectical approach to different issues, which actually enables to bring together two different views which seem to be contradictory. in the first glance. And I think if one is trained in this kind of thinking, it is much easier to avoid polarization than in the case if one has been trained in a slightly different paradigm. I hope this answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from Angela Hager. Angela, if you please unmute.
Hola, buenos días. ¿Me escuchan bien ahí? Soy Ángela Trejo Hager, directora del Seminario Luterano Augsburgo de la Ciudad de México. Muchas felicidades por tu nombramiento, Anne. Y la pregunta es si en tu periodo habrá algún diálogo con los seminarios luteranos en todas las regiones para justo poder dar respuesta teológica certera en estos tiempos tan convulsos y tan agresivos. Ya mencionaste trabajar contra narrativas desde nuestras propias teologías luteranas. Eso es importante y gracias porque lo escuchamos y creo que será muy bueno trabajar desde este punto. ¿Cuál sería entonces la idea de un diálogo con los seminarios en la región? Gracias.
Thank you so much. As I have been working myself in the field of theological education, this is of course a particularly dear topic to me. And I personally put very many hopes on the theological education network that has been just created actually. And I do hope that during the time of my leadership, I will be able to strengthen this network and to ensure that it really starts to function well and will really connect different theological institutions in various regions and also interconnect the regions with each other. And my big hope and wish is that it will be possible to create online courses and that they will be eventually then accommodated by one of the educational institutions in the communion, which is also able to issue a certificate afterwards, so that we are really able to support these smaller member churches who don't at the moment have even the possibility to offer a solid theological education for their future pastors. And I think it is really my deep conviction that that it will be a very crucial issue for the coming years, how we manage to educate the future pastors so that they are not, so to say, becoming part of this very polarized paradigm, which is being supported by some other groups also in the broader Lutheran family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have unfortunately only 6 minutes remaining until we have to stop. So I think we have space for approximately 2 more questions. The next question will come from Amrang Simangunsong. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Please unmute.
Thank you and congratulations to Reverend Dr. Anna Burghardt. So my question is, what is evangelism program offered by LWF in religious pluralistic context of the world? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think this is something that really needs a slightly broader discussion, what it exactly should look like, because if you mean now a specific program, I am not entirely sure if such a sort of a ready-made program exists at this point. But I think what I always say, we need to very closely to listen what the member churches are actually asking from the communion office, so that communion office can then serve the communion through creating the working groups, through creating materials, through bringing the respective persons together who are able to offer what is needed by the member churches. And I think also here, I believe that there is a strong need for such kind of, let's say, process or program, also particularly in Asia, where there is a very pluralist situation, also religiously. So I think here we really need just to bring different needs together and then find the right way how and which materials could be produced, which support could be offered, so that the member churches really benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Philip Tanis, you are next up, if you can unmute.
Yeah, thank you. This is Phil Tanis. I'm the Executive Secretary for Communications at the World Communion of Reformed Churches. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what your vision is for more fully living into the Wittenberg Witness that our two organizations signed together in 2017.
Well, thank you. I believe that in order to respond to this question, I will need to first take up the office and really learn to know also more about your World Communion and its current situation, because I think this can really be taken up only after some bilateral discussions where I have been able to make myself a better picture about where the World Communion of Reformed Churches stands at the moment and what are the exact venues where and how we could increase our cooperation. Because I think in some parts of the world, in particularly also in Europe, actually, in a certain sense, Lutherans and the Reformed churches have already reached the communion stage. They have sort of come already into the post-dialogue situation. So I think it is extremely important to come together and see what are the exact areas where we on the sort of the world, on the global level, can cooperate. And I think this, this needs to be found out in mutual conversations. What are the best ways to increase our cooperation also visibly? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have to wrap up now. So this was the last question today. We will, I know there are some questions remaining, but time does not allow us to reply to them here. As I said at the beginning, there is an opportunity to arrange interviews. Can I ask Stefan to put up the slide with that information? Just so you have the email address you can send to. I want to thank all of you so much for being here with us. You see the email address there. Drop us an email if you want to speak, and we will see what we can do to arrange that. If you have an interview slot this afternoon, make sure that you have the invite for the Zoom meeting in your email, and if not, reach out to me on the same using the same email address. Thank you again. We have been very happy to have you with us here for this first press briefing with the General Secretary-elect. Thank you, Anne, for being with us. It's been good to be with you today, and we look forward to the journey that is ahead. God's blessings.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your questions, and God bless.